as groundwater hydrologists, how do we go from here to here, accepting the fact that the soil surface at this heterogeneity at all the scale, surface roughness, vegetation. So all the physics as we know is happening here, and then how do I go to this scale? So this is the main challenge, how do we do this? And there are no solution to this problem yet, but I think this is what we are trying to do. So these are the challenges. How do we couple porous media to fluid flow and soil heterogeneity and upscaling? And then on top of that, the soil is continually being disturbed. So if you go to a site, if you look at large areas, urbanization, so if you have any type of climate model, as soon as you go and there's a deforestation, that thing changes. So we are also looking at the issue of disturbances, both natural and anthropogenic disturbances on the soil surface. So the solution to this actually came some time ago. So I actually wrote a proposal to the Department of Defense to see whether, because they were very interested in landmine detection. So we thought that as groundwater hydrologists, what we do is we do everything assuming that the boundary condition of the land surface. And as atmospheric scientists do the other way, they assume everything up here, for them it is an unknown boundary condition. So we thought that the best way to look at it is to build a new facility where we actually couple a climate wind tunnel to a soil tank. So we go to the large tanks, we have been working in the other lab, and say, okay, let's do this. So, but when you do this, it becomes a challenge because the atmosphere, the climate change in the atmosphere. So if you have to look at this problem, you need to have control of what happens in the atmosphere. So these are climate wind tunnel. So you can control climate. I'll talk about it in more detail. So it's basically a 8-meter long tank, soil tank. And this is actually, I took this picture before they finished the thing. So these all are made out of wood, and this is basically the wind tunnel. The wind, there's a turbine, wind fan here, the fan goes around, and then we actually control the climate. We can control the temperature inside this chamber, we can control the temperature inside the wind tunnel, and then we can control the climate. So these are some of the instruments. We have a laser velocimetry system, we can measure the velocity profile, we can measure the pressure, temperature, and then we also can measure soil conditions. So we actually get really accurate data at this interface. So these are some of the controls. We can go to wind feed, we can go to sub-freezing actually, we can go to below 0 degrees, we can, so the below 0 Fahrenheit, and then so we can control the humidity. So I'm not going to get details of the experiment, but I'm just trying to make the point that these type of systems can be used to understand this project scale of interest, then you can address the large scale problem. So these are again another view of the wind tunnel. This is the long tank underneath. So this is sitting in a platform, we can jack it up, and then we can bring it down here, and then when you remove this base, then the soil surface is exactly here. So this is a tank with all sorts of sensors. These are all automated, so we can get this data, continuous data. So we can run the wind here, and we can measure the soil conditions here. So these are some, we measure some of the measuring system. We can measure velocity profiles, we can measure the humidity, etc. So this is, I'm going to some few examples, this experiment by me run. So we actually get this, we can get very accurate velocity profile with the velocimetry system. So you can see in this particular case we are showing the boundary layer, the velocity profile for different velocities. And then we also, we have this hypothesis that this micro scale process happening at the small scale are controlled by the soil roughness. So we could run different humidity, temperature conditions, we can control all these things and look at, you can see immediately that this velocity profile changes from this combination of temperature and humidity. So the point I'm trying to make is that we are sort of looking at this at a very smaller scale, but the argument we use is that but everything happens at the larger scale has something to do with this. If you don't understand this, then you may be just fitting stuff at the scale, and then you are losing all the important things. So this is again a detail of an experiment we did where we look at various boundary conditions we can in the soil. So what we do is we ran some experiments where we assume we ran an experiment where the evaporation function of time. Now we went to the literature and look at various boundary conditions people assume. So as soon as you put the boundary condition they assume, you can see the error we can produce. So the reason for that is that the boundary condition cannot be assumed. the boundary condition is a derivative of these two systems which have been coupled. Okay, so you can go completely wrong with evaporation if you assume the wrong thing. The reason you are assuming is that because we don't know how to couple these things. So this is our ultimate goal. So I mentioned this, the velocity profile, soil moisture. What people do now is atmospheric scientists work on this and we work on this. So we assume something, they feed it to them, they feed something back to us. But this is very important. I think some of you probably know this, that some of us are working on saturated zone. We found the capillary fringe is so important. Similarly, I was told that if you look at the ocean science, the first millimeters of the ocean wave has so much microbial processes. All this happens in this very, very thin layer. So this is the area there we don't understand. So this is the place we don't understand. This is the place making the assumption, and we are making all sorts of predictions based on this assumption. That's the argument we are making. And again, this is a very difficult battle to win for us because atmospheric scientists are not very supportive of these ideas. They think that we don't want to do this. So we are trying very hard to convince people this is the way to do it. But we have published a number of papers, we are making these points. So these are some things we could do. So if I take a very big block of soil, then you ask the question, you see that here we have a hypothesis that depending on the soil, the evaporation can change. So you have a situation here. So what happens is when you have evaporation here, there will be, when the soil is more evaporation here, soil get dry, so there will be lateral water flow by diffusion. So you even though the evaporation happens here, it is not a local phenomenon, it is controlled by what's happening in the heterogeneity. So we have the instruments to do this, we can understand these things, how these things. Then the question has to be still asked from engineering point of view, what is the effective evaporation block of soil? So we don't know that yet, but we believe that we have the experimental method, we have the theoretical foundation, following the ideas I mentioned earlier. So each time we do this experiment, we develop models going parallel with the experiment. So then this is an example. So these are the example we are experiment you run now. Soil number 1, soil number 2, soil number 3. So you see that on top of that you have this surface roughness. There will be mixing going on here. So what is the effective evaporation? And then what happens if you have vegetation? So if you have vegetation, there will be lateral flow. There will be more water taken out of here. So the research vision we have in our research is ultimately to come here, but going through the process I talked about, the physics. So the thing is, in upscaling theories, what we find is that when you go to larger and larger scales, some of these processes may not be important. You can say that at the larger scale, you don't have to worry about all these things. So, but we don't know that yet. So we cannot go and just say that at a larger scale, let's go and measure this. We don't know what to measure at the larger scale. So I think when the computer gets more powerful, people have they can refine this into small cells, but we are long ways for grid refinement in atmospheric models to capture these processes. So these are some papers, there are recent papers, and there are recently 2011. A number of other papers came out, and then you can read this. Okay, I want to talk about this problem. So this is a problem where the third interface. So I was looking at this interface between little pore interfaces. Now we went to that interface to this interface of the land atmospheric interface, but this is the ocean land interface. I thought this is a good talk for to do here. So I don't know whether this is going to work or this is going to work.
I think maybe if you click over.
Yeah, I think. So this is a simulation. Some of you may have seen this. It ran in my computer. Okay, so I wanted to watch this simulation. US did a tsunami. So tsunami happened. So you see the tsunami in Sumatra, and this is a very high earthquake. So you see, I want you to look at what happens to the wave here. So this is Sri Lanka, this is India. So you see the wave comes around and it wraps around the island. Okay. So this has some implications on how we are going to look at this problem. So this is for the simulation. So you can see that this is so the biggest earthquake in Chile, and this is actually, I think this is upgraded to 9.3 magnitude tsunami. And so in Sri Lanka, so this was hit. So this is the first point it got hit. So this whole coastline was affected. So what happened when the tsunami hit, if you remember that picture, the simulation, the wave wrapped around the island, and you could see the wave heights. You get some places it's more than 10 meters. Yesterday I heard that in some of the places do the surfing, the wave height can be 40 feet. Is that correct? Okay, so but this is a 40 feet wave which is coming into the land, not in the ocean. So you could see, so you can see the wave height. So this whole area was affected. So I actually took a team to Sri Lanka, and we couldn't go up here because there was a civil war going on. But we actually traveled all the way down here, and then did a lot of work on looking at the west. There were 32,000 people died, and 500,000 displaced. 32,000 is a big number because Sri Lanka has about 20 million people, and Indonesia had 160 million died, but there are more millions in Indonesia. And this is a major disaster. It never happened in the history of the country. So this is some satellite pictures. So this is actually the before the tsunami. You see the coastline, and there was so this particular picture was taken somewhere around here actually. So when the wave wrapped around. So some of you know the tsunami dynamics. When the earthquake happened, the water gets sucked out first, and then the wave comes back. So now you see the second slide. So see that now it's getting sucking out. So it was a Sunday morning, and a lot of people, and I want you to, as a hydrologist, I want you to look at this, not only look at the ocean, look at here, whatever. These are regular residential areas, look very clean. So this is the day, it was a Sunday morning, then there were fish were just jumping up and down, the kids were playing cricket on the thing, people call their families and say, yeah, it's a nice day, it's a very sunny day. So people were sort of picnicking around the beach here, and without knowing that there was a tsunami coming, and there was no warning. In 2.5 hours, the tsunami hit. So you could see that. So I go to the hydrologist now, look at what happens to the land. So you see, this has the implications what I'm going to talk about in a minute, this whole issue of ocean land interaction. And you see the waves are coming here, there are a lot of circulation. You see the pools of water. So this wave travels actually about 1 kilometer in some locations, some places half a kilometer. So you see, okay, so these are what I was interested in this one, and then I mentioned this morning, and Harvey and Charlie, and we went to the field, and we were looking at these sites. There were 50,000 wells were destroyed, and then you have, most of the people everyone had a little well in their backyard. So there are 40,000, 50,000 of these were completely destroyed. They were just washed out, they were pouring water, debris in the wells, and all this. And then Charlie, so we went in and did some profiles. We were here, and so there is an example. So these are sort of funny. It doesn't look funny anymore, but this is what happened. Then people started pumping water, and then the salinity was not going down. They keep pumping again. They thought maybe salt got stuck on the walls, so they started washing the walls. So, but if you look at this picture again, you see where the pipe ends up. They pump the water and put the water back down here. So it went back into the well, and then so there's a recycling the water in the well. So these are good lessons to be learned. So this is the conceptual model we had. And the conceptual model is the traditional textbook model where you see that the tsunami wave came and it went down here, and the salinity, this plume is going to come down here. There's a salt water interface, and there were already some salinity in this area because people were pumping and some coning. So then when we were in the field, so the Manoa engineers, actually he became I think he's a head of a water resource board. He's a very smart guy, but he knew about this problem. So he drew this picture and said, yeah, what's going to happen is the rain is going to come, you're going to flush this thing out, it's going to flush out, and everything will be fine. So that was the idea. So, but it's not as simple because we were able to get some data at some wells they were using for drinking water. So tsunami happened on December 2004, and after December 2006 when we went to the field, so salinity, as you see, this is about 100,000 microsiemens per centimeter, and then at the peak of it, it went up to 5,000. That's pretty high salt. As the time went on, it went down, and then you could see that after 2 years, still there was salinity. It doesn't never come to this point again. So this was a puzzle because earlier they thought that it's going to get washed out. It didn't happen. So we actually, because I want to make the point here again that when you are done with this experiment, you know what happened. But to understand this, so we had this hypothesis because I was working on this whole issue of heterogeneity. So we hypothesized maybe it has something to do with the heterogeneity. Okay, so what we did was we decided on some experiments. One of my PhD students with used Copenhagen, so she came to our lab. So we ran these 3 experiments. First one, we actually created a completely homogeneous tank with a sprinkler system. We sprinkle salt water, and then we put one simple heterogeneity, this low permeability layer embedded into the soil here, and we had this opening here, and then the groundwater flow. So you see the heterogeneous experiment. Actually, we are doing similar experiment now in carbon sequestration. You will immediately see that when you have salt water, which is heavier than the green water, it's going to create these unstable conditions, and you see this fingering. The fingers came down. So if it's a completely homogeneous system, chances are this monsoon would have cleaned this thing up. Because when the new water comes, you can get flushed out. Okay? So this was not happening. So our hypothesis was that maybe it had the heterogeneity. So we ran the next experiment with a single layer. The fingers started like this. Now you can see as soon as the fingers went in there, it started diffusing into this. So in the paper we talked about the Rayleigh number. It's a critical Rayleigh number. When the fingers becomes less dominant compared to diffusion. You could see that as this thing went down, you could see that the fingers basically got destroyed and became like that. So you can immediately see a simple heterogeneity change the whole convective mixing process. So this is the same idea we're using in our work we are doing in carbon sequestration. We believe that when CO2 is putting in the ground, in the deformation, it's an LNAP, but it flows. When it dissolves, the solute is heavier than the salt water. It's going to finger down. So we have my PhD student running an experiment now, and we exactly the same thing with the CO2 problem. We believe that if you can get this stuff in here, it could stay there for a long time. So that's the whole idea, that you can increase the capacity of the aquifer to store the CO2 by using the heterogeneity advantage. So then the third one is experiment was this one I was showing earlier, that there is an opening here. You see, as soon as the thing came in here, everything started going through this. So now you got stuck here. So this is what's happening at this site. So when the tsunami came, it was a head-driven boundary condition. It pushed all the salt water through this opening into areas like this and got stuck there. And then now when you got stuck there, when the rainfall comes, rainfall is coming very slowly, it will never get here. So this thing started diffusing slowly, and it was contributing this salinity. So the salinity has gone away now, but at least we have some idea that our conceptual model with the nice looking picture I had earlier is not the one. So we can look at and say, yeah, this is sort of obvious, but at least we can demonstrate that we develop a model, and we can do a model to look at other things. So this is density. So this is the conceptual model we proposed. We said that now we are looking at the land atmosphere, like that interface between the ocean and the land. So now we hypothesize that it has to do with these 3 factors: soil heterogeneity, then the bathymetry, and I mentioned this morning someone that some places the wave traveled into the land much faster through the rivers, but some places when there was a coral reefs, the wave bounced back. So it's important to bring the bathymetry into your model. So also on top of that, we have this microtopography. So when the salt water went in, it got pooled in some local area, and it started infiltrating the system, creating local problem. So finally, the summary, again I'm putting slides from different talks. The summary is that I think, even though you may have the impression either I'm a modeler, I'm a lab guy, but I think this is the way we should do research. I think it has to be an iterative process where you don't want to stay here. I tell my students, if you're going to work in my lab, I don't want to be a person who solves only differential equation. You need to know what is happening in the field. You need to understand the processes here. It's an iterative process. This is the way we do our research. We do develop models, we question the model, we go to the lab, look at it, change the model, go to the field, when it makes sense, we come back. So this is the picture we showed at the beginning. So I was trying to make the argument that most of the interesting problems in hydrology are going to be at interfaces. We show 3 examples of interface in the micro-scale, pore-scale interfaces, large-scale interfaces, and large global-scale interfaces. So this is the way the field we thought was that I think I'm also going to make the argument I think all the interesting problems are at this interface of the fields also. Like if you are a person working in groundwater hydrology, you don't want to stay here. You have to be like this. You can go to this interface. You find there are a lot of interesting problems in the interfaces of the disciplines. not only the interface, the problem, it will disappear. So I tell my students that if you are looking for a job, don't do what your professor did. Look for these problems at the interfaces, then you are more marketable, you will be better than your professor. So all my students, I send them the chemical engineering, my student go to geophysics, my student take atmospheric science courses. I didn't learn my chemistry well, so I send all my students to good chemistry classes, geochemistry, and Scholar School of Mines is a really great good place to do this because we have very strong programs in all these areas. So with that, these are the conclusions. I basically mentioned this, understanding basic process important, and then exciting problems such as the physical interfaces, and these important theory-driven multi-scale experiments can help you do better modeling. And then again, I made the point, challenges require to move from center to these interfaces of your disciplines. I think either way, most of the graduate programs are changing these days. And then I was working at NSF. If you have better chance of getting project funded, if you go and talk to your biology colleagues, go to your chemistry colleagues, go to that's the place. Students should be, don't listen to your advisor, take all the class in the department, another department. So these are some of my funding sources. Students looking and thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer any questions. I think I took a little more time than I wanted to, but it was useful.
Questions, but don't ask about marijuana now. Colorado.
Yeah, I don't plan to grow anything in the winter yet. Doesn't that be the talk, but any question is fine, yes.
It seems like one of the biggest challenges in trying to understand a real system is characterizing or understanding the heterogeneity.
Yes.
Right? So
Yeah.
it seems like your predictions are heavily limited by that
Yes.
lack of knowledge.
Yes.
So you're working the modeling and the laboratory experiments, and you can help establish general relationships. Characters of connectivity for heterogeneity. Really get at a system you really need to understand.
Yeah, I mean, there is a practical and a philosophical question too. You know, so can I spend all my life in the lab and understand all this stuff? And when I'm going to go to the field, because I come from a very strong engineering background, like I'm an engineer. So I don't want to go and say that, let me understand everything of the heterogeneity, I go to the field. But in the field, we need to be able to interpret what you see in the field. But the point I was trying to make was that if we go to the field, and you know very well based on this type of work that heterogeneity is very, very important, because I can show you some examples where I can put a single block of material in this homogeneous tank, and that can make a big difference in the breakthrough curves, because they have the mass diffusion in and coming back. So then if you have a well here, if I have a well here, so people who think like this, or people, a lot of us think like this, if you think like this, then when you get a data from that well and get a data point from that well, then you know how to look at this data point in a different way if you have this understanding. But then at the end, you are still have two wells. Your client is not going to give you any more wells. But I think you'll be a better person, you are a better field scientist if you understand what the role of things which are happening. What is the black box in between? Is a black box, is there anything, something else is happening? You can ask questions. You may have a well here, you may have a channel in between, carrying all the stuff through one single layer. So these type of things are important. So from engineering point of view, ultimately I had to learn to use those two data points. I think I can do a better job if I had this understanding. So this is the problem we are having with atmospheric science people.
But from taking a broad view of the field as you have, shouldn't you be putting as much or more effort into methods to look at, to define the structure of geophysical methods?
So I didn't talk about this. So we use a lot of geophysical. So we actually published a paper which, so we did a very interesting experiment. So in one of the tanks, we had this random heterogeneity and put a one single layer of fines. So we had the geophysicists, okay, go and take do a geophysics and then see what is inside. So the geophysics came and told us, so there's one layer. So we found that if I know that layer exists, I can improve my calibration quite a lot. But if when I'm drilling holes in the ground, I may have a hole here, I may have a hole here, I never know whether it's a continuous or not. So geophysics has a really, really good role to play, but I don't, the problem is the geophysicists try to sell this as you can solve all the problems with geophysics also. So we published a paper where we actually took one of these tanks and we assumed that, so this tank, like you saw a picture of this tank with 29,000 cells. So we assumed that we know everything about this aquifer. We have 900 whatever boreholes. So what we did was we released data one at a time. So we found after a certain point, you don't improve your model. So after a certain number of wells, boreholes, no new information. So that's a really useful thing because people always say, go to the field, I have more data, I can solve the problem. But I think there's a certain point, the data doesn't have any value. So in the lab, we showed that particular number of boreholes had a lot to do with the degree of heterogeneity of the system. It's a highly heterogeneous system, you need to have more wells. It's a more homogeneous system, you may be able to manage with few wells. So those are, I think, those are important observations you can make in this type of experiments, even though it's not the reality, but we control the reality to the point we understand the process, then we learn to do things better in the field. So that's the idea.
I guess I'm sure you're aware of the role of scale for dispersion phenomena.
Yeah.
Have you touched it exactly in your work?
Actually, in one of the papers I mentioned about dissolution, that's what we are trying to do. So the whole issue of how to bring the information is an upscaling problem. That's what you're talking. So the difficulty with subsurface science is exactly that, because heterogeneity happens at every scale, from pore-scale rising to larger and larger scale. But then in the geostatistical type of models, people have geostatistical model which assumes a stationarity and all that. So in a certain problems, you can build a theoretical foundation to get the upscale, what is the effective parameter upscale system using a theoretical model. That's what we are trying to do with the mass dissolution. But a lot of these problems, you don't have that luxury, So it's not a stationary system, you never know this. So what we are saying is that when you go to some of this theoretical work we are doing in the lab experiment, we should be able to say that at a very large scale, all these parameters may not be important. There's one thing which is more important, that captures the large scale behavior. So then we develop field methods to measure that. Rather than going and drilling holes everywhere, we will do a tracer study. And the tracer will tell you some, a good example, let's say that when you got a highly heterogeneous system, the whole behavior is controlled by a pressure connected pathways. So we do a tracer study and identify that pathway. So that may be the most important thing for that particular example. So find a way of measuring that rather than measuring every hydraulic conductor at every point in the system. So that's the way I think we can handle some of the upscaling problem, because it cannot be driven by theory too far in real systems. You have to make the correct measurement at that scale. Like the question we are asking atmospheric scientists is that, so we do all this research, they say, okay, we are going to use satellite to get the soil moisture. So what they do is, the satellite get 100 kilometer block of soil, and the soil moisture content in this block of soil is 0.2. So as a soil physicist, we know 0.2 doesn't mean anything. That's a number which is nothing to do with the physics. So what we are saying is that what is that number 0.2 has to do with the process itself. So we may find that in the theory that 0.2 is a result of many other things, but it cannot be measured, but measure one thing, and you can get that. Maybe vegetation index something. So that's the direction I think this research can go, because I don't think it's practical for us to measure everything at every scale. This is the larger scale.
But still, the only way to estimate the dispersion coefficient is basically the inverse from, right? There is no direct way to still.
So in a way you can argue that the dispersion theory had developed to the point that you can do to some extent. But the problem we are looking at are quite different. We have multi-phase problems.
Right.
Now, carbon sequestration problem, and this is a problem with carbon sequestration because we have to go and design this sequestration system based on 2 boreholes which are $1 million. So how do I design this? So I'm running a proposal where we actually, like data assimilation, the idea is that if you have 2-3 wells, also look at how the sequestration affect the shallow subsurface. there's a leakage or a pressure buildup. So you can use that data to come out with a larger system. So I don't know the answer, but at least some of us have to do these things. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for coming. And,